Welcome to Model Horse Tack School. My name is Carrie, and today we're going to work on a Western shirt. And this is the 8-inch pattern. I also have one for the 6-inch. So we'll definitely do 8-inch male and female. Also for the 7-inch. So she's only a little bit shorter. We're going to fit these three. And then I'll use the 6-inch for these two. All right, that's what we're going to cover in this video. Now, let's talk about some preliminaries. I suggest you join a support group such as this one on Facebook, the Little Rider Doll Making Challenge. Once a year, they have a challenge where you make a particular doll of your choice, get lots of tips, tricks, and even more patterns. So go ahead and join that. Fabric. So you're going to want something that is very thin, which means it's probably going to be woven, not knitted. Now there's some times when you're going to need knitted, but if you can find the woven, they tend to be a thinner fabric. Now I'm going to use a color for the collar and then a pattern for the shirt. So I'm going to use two different colors, but you can do it all in one if you want. And this is the blue. So we'll do girls and boys. We're going to actually do the boys in brown and the girls in blue, just because the flowers are a little less obvious on this. Okay, because we're using a woven fabric, and that means you're going to have a possibility of fraying, you're going to want to use either a fray check, or this is a 50-50 solution of glue. This is Aleene's Tacky Glue, half water, shook up really well, and I bought the bottle, and it's got a really fine tip for dispensing it. Now the fray check dries faster. It might actually change the color of the fabric. It darkens it. It kind of looks like a stain. So you may not want to use the fray check, but check, where it is. But it does dry faster. So with the glue, after you do your fray check, and that's after you cut it out, then you're going to let it dry completely. Oops. It would help if I put it on right. There we go. We're dealing with really tiny seam allowances, and that's why that fray check is so important, because otherwise if it frays, there's not enough seam allowance to keep it from pulling apart. Okay, this is a very basic shirt pattern, and you can play around with it if you want and do other things with it. You don't need a lot of fabric. I got these squares of fabric on Temu because you can get a whole bunch of them. So I got all different patterns. And that way I don't have to buy a quarter yard is the smallest you can buy. I'm going to make a couple shirts out of this. And that's it, right? Okay, so what I did is I did the fold over, and then I'm going to get two of the shirt back, and I can get two of the sleeve. And then I can fold it out and get one of the shirt back. See, and I still have enough for another shirt. So it's about a 10-inch square. Now, sleeve is pretty simple. It's the same on both. This is for the girls. So if it's a girl shirt, you need that extra so she's got room for her breasts. But the brown, it depends upon what girl you're doing, obviously. But for the brayer rider, you need that. Since we're doing boys, I'm going to go ahead and cut that off. Okay, so for the cuff and collar, one collar, two cuffs. You don't actually have to do the cuffs. The outside is for the men and the inside line. The outside is for the men, the inside line is for the women. Okay, the very first step, regardless of whether it's 6-inch, 8-inch, male or female, so we need to do the shoulders. All right, so make sure you have right sides together, and you want it to match at the sleeve hole. Okay, match at the sleeve hole. You can sew it or you can glue it. Now I like my glue, which is Aleene's. It's not my glue, but I like Aleene's tacky glue. I use this for everything. I bought this stuff, Liquid Stitch, but I found it's really liquidy. I mean, it really is liquid. And when we're trying to do really precision seams, I just found it too liquidy. So you would put it where you want the seam, and that's about what you want. You don't, we're talking millimeters there. That's probably a 2 millimeter seam right there. And that's what you want. So I'll go ahead and use it, although I really don't like it, but I'll go ahead and use it. And then we're going to match the angle like that. And then what we really want to do before the glue dries too much, or as soon as it dries, so we're going to make sure that we got a straight seam. So I would fold it like this so that my seam is underneath. You see that? And then make sure that you don't accidentally glue the sides together instead, if that makes sense. So if I was using this stuff and it was all gloppy and it got all over the place, I could end up with these two pieces stuck here, and I don't want that. I just want the shoulder. So I am doing this to make sure, and yeah, it's going to glue down there, right? It's going to glue down the seam. Now, I prefer my tacky glue because it's thicker and it doesn't tend to wander as much as the thinner glues. So I can put, it's almost like a paste instead of a liquid, if that makes sense. And so now I can put my shoulder in like that. Make sure it's level. And then while it's still wet, I just want to very carefully check my seam. All right, so, and you'll see that this is the Liquid Stitch side, and it went all the way through. The tacky glue, I still have, for the most part, this is freed up. And it's fine. We're going to sew that down anyways. And also, if you see, I got a much smaller seam than with the Liquid Stitch. That's much better. So now the seams match. Let's do some sleeves. And I would definitely sew this. Now, I tried to make it easy on you. You have one straight line and then a little bit of a curve. All right, so if anybody's done sleeves on big people shirts, they can be a hassle. All right, so we need 2 pens. And what we're gonna do is take your corner and have your sleeves straight out, okay? We're gonna put the pen, one of them, right in that corner, and holding the bottom, which is your shirt part, spin the sleeve until the straight edge and the straight edge match. And that's where you're going to pin it for sewing. Now you don't have to use multiple pins. You could just go ahead and glue that, wait for it to dry, and then try and work this curve into this straight. It's going to be better if you use a sewing machine or sew by hand if you want to sew it by hand. I'm going to go ahead and use the machine. Okay, trying to show you this on the sewing machine has become a problem. But anyways, I have my stitch line here. And now, usually I would have my needle right here, and then I would just spin this to get my line here. Okay. So when I take that out and I turn it over, there's your sleeve, okay? And you can see we're getting to a point where we can fit and sew it. Now, ironing. Yes, this is a great time to get out the iron and the ironing board. Now, you want to bring the sleeves in this way. So if you've got any of these, like, see that little bauble there? I'm gonna be very careful not to hit my seam, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut that out so it'll lay flat. And then iron it this way, okay? Because you don't want it, if you iron that way, you've got too much fabric. So go ahead and iron all your seams at this point. And then I'll check this side as well. And again, a little bit of a bunching there, so right here, if you can see right there, that's not going to lay flat. So I want to kind of do, I do this with tack all the time when you're making something a circle smaller, and that's kind of what we have here is a circle, even though you didn't actually do a circle. And I have one on the other side too, so I'm just going to do a little snip and remove just a little bit of that fabric so that it'll lay flat. In fact, I had a little bit of overage there, so I'll go ahead and snip that off. And then iron it. I got this in Temu, I don't know, I think it was like $6. And it's a perfect size. Same thing with the ironing mat, which is perfect. So I don't have to get out my ironing board. I mean, this can just be close by with all my other stuff. If you hand sew, I'd use one strand of thread, not two. Something about this liquid stitch. If you read the directions, it says do not iron. So I wouldn't use it because you have to iron, so don't use it. It doesn't have an automatic shut-off, so you do have to be careful about that. Be sure to turn it off and unplug it. Okay, start with the boys. Now, we want this. You're going to lose some up here, so don't worry about that. But you do want it to be even down here. If their arms come out, it's better to have their arms come out. Okay, the trick with the guys, even with the gals, is it has to be able to go, the hand has to be able to get through. So this is going to be all by itself. You do a 16th, do a tiny seam, and you're going to be good on him all the way. There's no fitting needed for that. The other thing we need to look at, though, once we get this tucked in like that, do I need to hem the sleeves? Once we get these pinned, if you want, I can do. So we're going to get this pinned. You don't want it too tight. I mean, you could do this tighter around the waists. Right now we're worried about the arms. The question is, do I need to trim the arms? Now, I don't think I like that, so let's see. I'm going to do this a little tighter here. And then this side, if I want the seam just past his actual joint, because otherwise it'll be way up here. And he should have shoulders. It's weird when they're jointed like this. This area here would be covered in skin, but it's not in a doll. So we want to make sure that's over there. And so I need to take a little bit off of there. Now, I tried to give some forgiveness, and that's depending upon how it's always better to do too long than too short. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and sew this with a tiny seam, and then see if I need to trim any off, because that armhole is going to make a difference there on how tight this is. So I'm going to sew it all the way up to the armhole on both of the sleeves, and then I'm going to verify that length and see if I have to take that off or not. I'm going to keep the sides pinned. I'm going to check the fit of the sides. Down here in the rump, I'm going to stop the seam right about there. I just want to get his waistline, and then this should be long enough that it'll stay in his pants. That's going to be snug right there. That's good. Now, so on both sides, it's going to go in a little bit, and then we can mark that with a pen or something. But if you see that, it's a V. Now you can make it loose if you want, but it should fit snug. So we're going to go for that V shape. I'm going to use my pens as a guide, but you can use like a pencil. There's quilting pencils, quilting pens. I think all of them, no matter what they say, they're not temporary. So why spend a lot of money on a special pencil when, you know, this is a cheap disposable mechanical pencil. And so I can mark the diagonal that I want with this pencil if it wants to behave itself. And it's a very light line. It's going to be right on this seam, no bleed through. And then I'll go ahead and get that seam done. So, like I said, I'm only going to go to right about here. And I'm going to leave that open on the bottom. Okay, and you can see where the pencil line is. It's right on this seam. It's not going to be seen from the front. But this, pretty good. The hands, now that I've done this, I could take a little bit off. Their arms, it gives you a little bit, the pattern gives you just a little bit of finagle. We're going to wait till we see if we put the cuffs on. Okay, so he's pretty much fitted. Now this guy. Studley. Okay. He has massive hands. So we can take about that much. But that's about it on both sides for those hands. Because that's really what you sew in the arm for, is to be able to get this off and on, right? Or at least to be able to get it on. If you can't get the thing on. Okay, so hands. Measure for the hands. Yes, I've had to throw things away because I made it so tight I couldn't get the thing on.
I just make it a habit to mark with a pencil. I'm not, but that's me. I can eyeball things pretty good, but I'd go ahead and pin it, take it off, and then mark that line for the seam with a pencil. And once we're sewn, now we're going to do the sides. And there's not a lot. He's got a weird anatomy. So we're going to try and figure out from the armhole along the side, and we're trying to do a bit of a triangle like the other 8-inch doll, but he doesn't have as much of a V. He's a little bit straighter. And again, we're just going to go to about the hip. Once you've figured out where you want those pins to go, that's going to fit the way you want it to fit, you're going to want to put your pencil lines in. I would take the shirt off and do the pencil lines, or you could do the pencil lines with the shirt on, but then darken them after you take the shirt off and before you sew it. Okay, one final fitting, making sure that it fits on the shoulders, the sleeves, all of that. Now, keep in mind when I do the sewing, like the armhole, I only go right to the armhole. Don't go over. And then on the sides, you're going to go right up to where the armhole is. Don't go over. All right, so there's actually going to be a little space in the pit itself that may not be sewn, and your seam fabric should cover that. If you sew in that pit area, you may find that when you turn it right side out, it pulls. And that's because you've sewn those pieces together, and then you have to go in and do some snipping. So just be careful of that. Don't feel like you need to sew up the side and then down the arm. All right, he's done. Let's move on to the 8-inch female doll. She's going to be the most challenging. Again, measure for the hands. Your hands are smaller, so we can make it tighter. Mark with a pencil where your seam line is going to be. Go ahead and pin it in place so everything's nice and flat. And do that for both sides. Okay, so the arms are sewn, and we're putting it back on to verify the fit. And you can see it's snug on her arms, and that's what we want. And put her arms out, because that'll tell you, do I need to remove a little? And they're going to be a little long. We'll go ahead and do the arms on all of these at a different point, like just before you put on the cuffs. But basically, we're just trying to do the sides. And she's going to be a lot more fitted than any of the others. She has got this huge V. So we want to get it, she'll be a little tricky. So you can see I'm just taking my time. There's no rush here. This is probably the most important part, getting the arms and the sides done, because that's going to make the biggest impact on your final product. So it looks like I finally got it. This is from the back side, and I'm trying to get that pin right there. Now this is just to give me an outline, because once I'm pretty sure that's how I want it to fit to the waist, I'm going to take out my pencil. And with her, I'm going to go ahead and trace the hips as well. So I need to make sure I sew it far enough down that there's no gap on the sides. So I'm going to go ahead, and I'm not worried about the front because I'll lay it flat and do the front. But here, I'm going to trace the hips. And I'm not going to sew all the way to the bottom, but I am going to sew around those hips. So you can see that right there. That's my pencil line. And it's just a little bit right now. I'll take it off, lay it flat, and make that darker before I sew. Okay, so I'm laying it down flat, make sure the edges match. And then I'm going to go ahead and retrace that pencil line. And I'm going to do this one side at a time because that front might get in the way. But now the arms are done, and we're just kind of checking the fit. We'll have to pull a lot of that neck when we put the collar on to get the collar to fit, but we can fit the neck then. But look how nice and snug this fits. And once we fold over the lapels, that's going to fit nice. But I have a whole bunch of fabric on the sides now that I need to trim off. So we're going to trim it. Sorry, I'm out of frame here. But basically I'm just trimming that curve so that you can see it there, so that I don't have so much bulk right around her waist. We don't want that. That just takes away from the look. And because I did that on both sides, I also now need to redo my liquid stitch to make sure that I don't fray. All right, now we're doing our felt doll, or my felt doll. She's built a little bit differently. I gave her some nice biceps. So I have to make sure then, because that's the biggest part, not her hands, that when I sew this, which is done right here, that I've sewed it for her biceps and not her hands. And you can see that it fits her pretty good. The cool thing with these dolls is that because she's got metal armature, I can adjust where her shoulders are. And this is one last chance to make sure she's symmetrical in the shirt. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing that we've done with all of the others. We're going to put it on, we're going to pin it in place, and we're going to trace out how we want those sides. She's going to have a very mild V, nothing like the 8-inch female doll. So that makes it so much easier, because I'm not going to have that funky curve with the hips and then taking out all that extra. And she's going to be pretty much straight down like the guys. And I designed her that way because it's just so much easier. So on her, I'm going to pin down here by the hips on both sides, and then I can find out where to put that waistline. And it's going to be mild. She'll have a mild waistline. But I was careful to make sure that her hips were not too big, so they weren't going to be bigger than this shirt. Now you could certainly modify the doll and the pattern if you want to make somebody that looks more like an ant or something, do a portrait doll this way. You certainly can do that. And that's kind of the fun of doing the felting. Is just remember that you're within certain parameters for the shirt. So you would need to enlarge the sides and the arms if you're going to make something bigger. But if you're, okay with that, that would be really cool to do. And I think I might do that in the future, is just to maybe do parents and grandparents, because they were not slim and they were built very much like me, squat and round. So here we have arms and sides sewed up. Now these felt dolls, the fabric can stick a little bit, so you have to kind of pull it around. She's going to need a little bit of trim on the sleeves. That collar is going to fit her a lot better than, there's going to be less finagling on the collar to get that to fit. And so we'll just go ahead and pin that in place. You could pin it to her. Again, she's felt. I really like these felt dolls. All right, put her aside. Last one is our 6-inch. And it's exactly the same thing. And the point here being that fitting the pattern is more important than the pattern itself. And that's true when you make big people clothes as well. And I did make my clothes for a while so I could get clothes that fit me for work, because nothing out there did. I mean, I'm a petite, but I'm overweight. And so a size 18 petite is an oxymoron for the clothing manufacturers. Okay, just fitting for the arms. Now we're going to go ahead and take that to the sewing machine and we're going to sew it. And because this is sleeves are too big for her, they're the right size for the 6-inch male, but they're way too big for the 6-inch female. We're going to cut away the excess. I did a little bit of overage there, so I need to, do a little ripping on the seam. Again, we'll pin on the sides so that we can get that to be flush. And now we're going to try and pin from the back so that we can get the V that we're looking for. This is really just a refresher. We've been over it before, but I'm going to show you again. It does pertain to the 6-inch doll as well as the 8-inch female doll. So you want your V, you pin it, you go ahead and mark it with your seam line with a pencil, and then I take it off and retrace it so the line is darker before I sew the seam. Okay, side seams are sewn. Now I'm putting it on again, making sure it fits so I don't have to rip it up and try again. And then if I like it, I can go ahead and cut out the side pieces. Now you could take it off the doll to do it. I guess I was in a hurry. This is like 2-day marathon of making clothes. All right, so now I'm putting on that fray check because if I cut an area, I need to do the fray check. Okay, we'll set her aside for now. And we're going to move on to collar. Now the collar is the same. The collar and the cuffs and the sleeves, that process is the same for all of the dolls. So I'm going to show it to you once. First thing we want to do is we're going to fold over and finger press, probably a 2 millimeter, maybe 3 millimeter section. We don't want to sew this because there's so many layers of fabric that it'll never lay flat. So we're going to do the glue, and we're going to do the very back first and make sure the back is nice and flat and secure. And then you can see as I turn it, it's easier now to do the sides. So we'll go ahead and do the sides again. It's going to be up to you. You can make it V-neck so that it has a slant, or you can, like this here, I'm just going to do a straight neck. So it's going to go about a 2 to 3 millimeter seam or fold over in that area. See, pretty simple. Glue works really well, really quickly to set up and hold that. Make sure you don't have any weird wrinkles or creases or anything. And then we're going to do the same to the other side. And like I said, same process for all the dolls. This is not really any different. You can, like I said, you can play with the pattern and come up with other things. Because sometimes it's boring doing the same shirt over and over again. But this is nice and basic, and it should be easy to modify to other styles. So now we got that done. Now we're going to move on to actually adding the collar. So we're going to find center back. And to do that, I'm going to fold the shirt like that, matching my shoulders, so I can find center. And then I'm going to go ahead and mark that center. It's important so we get the collar on straight. And I've put the collar on crooked many times, so it's a very common thing to put them on where they don't center like they should. Okay, now I'm folding the collar in half. At this point, you can decide if you want the collar shorter or longer or thinner or whatever. Collar is, another one of those features you can modify, and you probably will as you go along. Okay, now I usually do this half at a time, and that helps me keep it centered. So I will put a little bit of glue from the center line to the shoulder, which is what I'm doing here. And then we're going to lay the collar right on the seam. So it's really like a 3 millimeter seam, that glued seam. And we want to get the edge to match the raw edge of the fold over. And we're just going to the shoulder. And now we're going to do the other side, the center line to the shoulder. It's always easier and better to do this one in pieces because it does show. And like I said, I've put this collar on crooked before. And this seemed to be a process that helped me get it nice and centered. So we're just going to follow that fold over because we don't need really all that much right there at the neck. And using this process reduces by about 4 layers of fabric and then all the thread. If you've ever done a collar, it's where everything bunches up. So this way here, it should lay better. This is one of the tips that I got from that doll group on Facebook when I posted, and they said, okay, this is what you need to do to get rid of that bulk. Oh, well, much better. So, like I said, good to get good tips from people who have been doing this a lot longer than I have. Like I said, I've made clothes. I just haven't made doll clothes, or very few. When I was younger, I did because, I had a doll that I liked and a horse that I liked, and they went together really well. So now we're doing the other side. for the collar. I'm going to glue it down. And you kind of turn it just a little bit, and you want it right on that edge. And that's how you add your collar. Okay, sleeve fitting. So I've determined how much I need to take off. You can mark it with a pencil, you can do a little clip with the scissors, you know, whatever it is that you want to do to mark where it is that you need to cut. So we're going to take it off. And we're going to go ahead and cut the amount that I'd already figured out. It's not very much for this guy. A lot of this depends upon your seam allowance. So and that's why there has to be forgiveness, because you may have a larger seam allowance than I do. And so I give you a little extra for forgiveness, but that means you're going to have to probably trim your sleeves, or maybe not, depending upon, like I said, how it goes. Now I did the trim, and now I'm going to turn this right side out because we're going to work the cuffs from the front. The cuffs, you don't have to have them. If you trim the sleeve, be sure to do your fray check or something to treat those edges so they don't fray. Because anytime you cut, you're going to go ahead and do your fray check. Okay, so I'm just using my skinny fingers here. Get a grip, pull it through. You can use any tool or process you want to do. Got to be careful because it's not fray checked, so this could fray just with that much handling. Now I need to decide, what am I going to do? Now if you want, it could just be a band, so you could just cut these in half and then straighten the edges if you want. This here I'm going to give a little bit of an angle. It's too big for this arm. I could have made it smaller on the pattern, but you're going to determine how you want this to go. So I'm going to go with the points facing or against the seam. So the opening of the cuff should be where the seam is on the shirt arm. And I put my stylus in here. You could put a dowel, you could put a pencil, put a Sharpie, whatever. But something that makes it round so that I can put the glue on it and get a good press when I'm putting the cuff on. So we're going to go ahead and get the glue all the way around, because we're going to do this in one shot. And you can get creative, decide what you want to do. I'm going to go ahead and take a cuff and pointing, this one I'm going to have it point outwards because I'm going to fold it back. So I'm going to start right where the seam is. I'm going to wrap it around. Now I've been working on these shirts for quite a while. I think I was in a rush here. I think at some point the cats came and said, you need to stop and take a break. And you know it's bad when the kittens tell you it's time to stop and take a break. So we're just wrapping it. Sorry, I'm wandering off again. I just get so involved in what I'm doing, and I can't see the screen. I'm using a tablet as my camera, and I cannot see the screen. I'm going to see if I can get a monitor and make it so I can actually see the screen when I'm doing things. Anyways, there you go. I got it, and I'm going to trim it. See how I have the points? You don't have to have points. I think this is a 70s style shirt, but that's fine. It's a style. And I should be waiting for the glue to dry, but I'm not. So I'm going to go ahead and fold it back and fold it over. And then the glue is still workable, so I'm going to go ahead and get that around. And now off of the stylus or the pencil or whatever is what I'm going to do my other little final details. I'm going to try and get that fold over to be even all the way around, because it wasn't. And then I decided to trim it a little more because I didn't need that fancy pointed cuff. So depending upon how you want to work your cuffs, go ahead. Easiest way is not to have cuffs, or just put a band, glue a band right on the edge. You could do that too. Those are easy ways. I just felt that this fabric needed like a definition. If it had it around the collar, it needed around the cuffs. But that's just preference. I'm no fashionista. I have a hard time, keeping my clothes where I match. Try really hard not to do stripes and plaids together on the same day. There we go, little trim. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same to the other side. And here I'm just kind of straightening up the collar a little bit, because now we're going to do the front. Now, any of your straight bodied, like your 8-inch male, your 6-inch male, and even the felted body I did, the 7.5-inch, they're pretty straight. So this will apply to all of them. All right. What you want to do is you're doing this fold to determine how open you want that collar. Now this collar is a little bit, it's not tight enough on his neck. And I'm doing this for the camera. Later on, I looked at it and said, oh, that's not tight enough. And I went ahead and tightened it. And so that the collar points are just like the color of the collar is touching. But you can determine how tight you want the front. It's really pretty simple. You're going to fold under and finger press and then glue down your lapels. Now they do need to be, one of them at least needs to be longer than the other, because then you're going to glue it to itself. I do not recommend using closures. This is not a removable shirt. If you absolutely want a removable shirt, yeah, you could put a strip of thin Velcro or maybe a couple of snaps. It's not going to look as good. It's not going to look as realistic. So now that I kind of have what I want, I'm going to just go ahead and glue down the front. I forget, with men and women, it's a little bit different. Women are like right over left and men are left over right or something. I don't know if anybody will notice that. But if you want authenticity, do it that way. That's because for many years women did not dress themselves. So it was for the dresser to be able to button or zip them up or whatever. All right. So here we go. Not a big fold over, but it's just enough that it should kind of be straight down the body. And if you put on buttons on the outside as an accent, it will really make a difference. I'm trying to tighten up that collar a little bit. It needs to be tighter. I did tighten it up later on. All right, so that is your men's or really stick figure. This is the booby doll. This is the one that has the chest. And you really have to work her work this, because you're going to go for, you want it really tight over the center of the chest. And then it's going to be a little bit looser towards the neck. And the only way really to fix that is to fix the doll. But this fits really nice along her waistline. See, that's nice. And I just kept working it. And so now it's at a diagonal. There you see that fabric. I wouldn't use stripes or plaids on this doll because she has such curves. They would just look warped. But this is an abstract flower pattern. So you can see I'm trying to get the neck. So I'm folding that around the neck as close as possible to where that collar is. And it really I could have trimmed the collar and made it tighter. And then have the collar back further. But that to me seemed to be really important. So if I got that, then I'm going to go ahead and that's going to help with the chest. But it's just going to be tighter. So it's a little bit harder to glue. Sorry, I'm running off the edge again. But here, it's just work it. Fold it under. This is where I want it. And just keep doing that. And I did trim some of the fabric off because it was just too much. But there we go. Now we're going to fold it and glue it. There we go. Looking good. Getting down all the little pieces, getting the neckline down. Even though this is sped up, take your time. So making sure that's going to go under the collar. And now I'm gluing this in place. And I kind of push the fronts near the collar back a little bit so they're not really straight. That's why I did those separately. All right, so now we're going to do the final glue down the front. And as you can see, it's really tight over that chest. So I have to hold that and hold it because the glue, there we go, was having a problem. So re-glue that because that's your stress point. And if you want it straight, I'm getting a little familiar with this doll, but that's the best way to make sure that that is straight. Using a stylus to push that in there. And actually this turned out really good. A little bit of fold over there. Sometimes I'll glue down the collars after I'm done so that they're exactly in the place, just the points. But that's how you do your, I redid this. So I got a little bit tighter around her hips and waist. There you go. So I'll go ahead and set that aside. Okay, there they are. I'm going to move on to pants next. That would be the next item of clothing I suggest doing. Thank you for spending time with me today. Like, subscribe, tell all your friends about the channel, and have yourself a really good day.